Hi everybody, this is Katie. Welcome to Chapter 5 lecture on repetition structures. So I want to talk briefly. I know I say that all the time. I'm doing 20 minutes here. 20-minute short lecture because we're going to learn more in the Code With Me video than you do in the lecture video, but I want you to listen to this because we've got a ton of really good resources I want to point out to you. So Chapter 5 is on repetition structures. We'll look at what that means, and then we'll look at the basic loops, the while loop, the do while, and then also count control loops such as for loops, doing running totals, and then nesting loops together. The other thing with loops is this is the third structure of programming. We have sequence, we have decisions, which we learned last time, and we have repetition. And as our programs grow bigger, we do all three of these: sequence, repetition, and decisions. So to start off with a loop, it's a repetition structure. So a loop causes a statement or set of statements to execute repeatedly. That's all that it is. We put it in a program to make our program run multiple times. Now, there's the different types of loops, and in our notes here, basic loop notes, I'm going to open that. It's a text file that just shows you kind of pulls together everything in the chapter on when to use which loop and which loop does what. So I'm uploading a YouTube video at the same time, so my thing's a little slow. So here, if you know how many times you need to do something, use a for loop. And then we give you a couple for loop examples. These examples are in Small Basic, so we'll actually code in the Code With Me video. This is just the short lecture video. If you don't know the number of times you want your loop to do, use a while loop. But you could also use a do while loop. So those two loops are interchangeable. So we have three main loops we're going to look at. The for loop for when you know exactly how many times, and then the while loop or the do while loop when you're not sure the exact number of times. A while loop is right here. That's called a pre-test loop because the condition's at the top. So if this condition is false, then whatever we put in here is not going to process. And the do while loop is called a post-test loop. This loop is always going to run at least one time because whatever it'll go through and then test the condition at the bottom. So if the condition is false, it still goes through one time and then it ends. But if it's true, it goes back up. Now, important to know for Small Basic, we have a while loop that we can use and a for loop. And when we do the Code With Me videos, we'll look at a lot of things. We'll do that in Small Basic, but the three major loops that you'll use in any language, and they're pretty much standard in any language: the for loop, the do while loop, and the while loop. And the while loop and the do while are very interchangeable. It's easy to use one instead of the other. So this is the PDF introducing Small Basic. This is the PDF with the different chapters, and it shows you a couple for loop examples. So you could use, okay, the for loop, this is not how to do a loop. Using the go-to statement is something that you don't want to do when you're coding. Go-to is not supported in every platform, and I've seen you start to use it in different programs, and programming teachers hate when you use go-to. It's a novice mistake, so don't do it. Don't do go-to. It's easy, but don't do it. So here's a proper for loop that you would write in Small Basic. For I equals 1. So I is just a counter to 24. Then we want to write something to the screen or do whatever and end for. So that's the basic syntax. And I is the counter. We'll explain that. The keywords that you've seen 4 and 4, and then let's look at the other to do. Here's a loop where we're walking backwards or going backwards in our loop, counting down. And then here's the while loop. So remember in that notes we were just looking at, the while loop requires a prime read. And we'll look at those examples in this lecture video. But here's a prime read. It's where you either set a variable to something or you initialize it to, or you have the user enter it in. So you'd say, like, how many times do you want your loop to run? Well, I want it to run 100. So while 100 is greater than 1, I want to do something, and then you have to change that loop control variable. Otherwise, you're in this infinite loop. So that's what we're doing here. And then end while. So in this example, the keyword while and end while are used for your while loops. And we'll do a lot of loops in our code with me. So that's the short section. Don't use go to. It should even say that in here. Go to, bad, bad. Okay, that's the 2 pages we have in the small basic guide on writing loops. Now that's not all that's not all complete. So the other thing that I've given you in our chapter folder are some sample files that Professor Coates had written up for his lecture videos, but they're useful for us. So there's a loop example 1, chapter 5 example 1, and chapter 2 example 1. Remember, you can download these and save these to your computer and then open them via Small Basic, or you can just print it off for a reference guide. If you want to do that, I've given you the PDF, and I like examples on paper. And if you're in my face-to-face class, we can get you copies of those. I'll print them off for class. But if you're at home, maybe print that off, because it's these 3 programs in one document, and it just helps you pull all your examples together. But if you want to download these now, you can, or you can just watch me. Now, I've downloaded them already, and I've opened them in Small Basic. Let me close them all up so we can show you. Once you download them, you can't just double click on where they're located. So like I put them in here. Remember, you can't double click. So you got to open Small Basic and then open the files. So we're going to look at example 1. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I'm watching the time, by the way, 10 minutes. Okay, so here we have a program. Now remember, we're using all of the things we've learned. We have methods or module calls, we have loops, and we have decisions in here. So this program asks the user to enter a valid age and determines if the user is old enough to watch a particular movie. So we'll use a pretest loop to perform the input validation. So we're starting to get into some error code too, which is awesome. This loop demonstrates how you can use a prime read. So prime reads are needed with while loops. Real short program. Okay, so we have our module down here called validate age. And what this does is it says, what is your age? And it reads an age. So it's not really, actually this is kind of in a weird spot. I might change it around. But it's just entering age. So I might even call that enter age instead of validate. Yeah, maybe. Oh, I won't change it, but I would do that. And then this is really the validation process right here. So we come down here, we enter in the age, and then we go back up to line 15, and then nothing's there, so we go to line 16, and we say while age is less than 3 or age is greater than 130. So you'll notice right away, in loops, what are we using? We're using conditions. Conditions control the loop. So while it's less than 3 or greater than 130, then sorry, that's an invalid age. You must enter something between 3 and 130. So less than 3 is 210 negative, and greater than 130 is 131, 32, 33. Those aren't valid ages. So if that's wrong, we go and validate age again, meaning we come down here and have them enter it again. Once it's a good age, we break out of this end while, and then we check to see if it's 16. So if age is greater than or equal to 16, they can watch the movie. Else, they can't watch the movie. So we have an if-else and a loop that does our validation. So that's one simple example. You run it, and you'll be using these in the homework too, so it's important to check them out. Okay, what's your age? Remember, 104 is not valid, not old enough. Read an age. Oh, 104 is. Oh. See, I'm just hitting enter on accident. 141, it's not a valid age. 0 is not a valid age. 2 is not a valid age. If it's less than 3, so 3 is a valid age. But then it says you must be 16 or older to watch the movie. Okay. So, let's see. What if we just enter a valid age to begin with? 15. Well, let's enter in 14. You must be 16 or older to watch the movie. Okay. Let's run it one more time, and we'll put in 18. You are old enough to watch the movie. So you can see how that's working. Now, one of the other things that we're going to do with our programs is we're going to run them multiple times. So you see how I'm running this, and I put in an age, and then if I want to run it again, I have to close it and open it back up. Well, you can easily write this program to run multiple times by adding a loop. So if I wanted to take, I'm not going to save this in this file because they're already out on Blackboard. So if you want to write this information down, now might be a good time as you're watching the lecture notes or watching the lecture video to get out pen and paper, because when I ask in your programs to write or write your program so that it runs multiple times, that means you need to do a while loop around the whole program. So this is not a count control loop. We don't know how many times. It's a user controlled loop where we're going to ask the user how many times do we want to run the program, or we'll ask them if they want to continue it. So one way you could do that is you could have a loop control variable. So like you could say a variable called run again, and that's a string. So we'll set that equal to yes to begin with. We'll use lowercase, yes. And then we'll say while run again is equal to yes. We have to put double quotes around it because it's a string. And in small basic, remember it's only one equal sign. So while run again is equal to yes, what do we want to do? Well, we want to validate age, and then we want to end the while. What's that keyword? End while. Okay, now here I have this. Remember, this was the method call that kind of kick-started everything. So if I want to run it again, what am I trying to do? If I want to run it again, I want to ask a question. So when you read the chapter and you read the part about count controlled versus user controlling, or you'll see do you want to do another calculation or things like that, then that's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to If I run this now, it's an infinite loop because I never change yes. But I'm going to ask a question now. So I'm going to just do a simple text window dot write statement, and I'm going to say enter yes to run again with new information, or no to end the program. So we're asking them a specific value, enter yes or no. So we're going to read that in to run again. So run again is equal to read text window dot read, and it's just a string. So if they put in right here YES lowercase, it will do line 19 again. If they don't, it's going to end the program. So let's test this. Now I could also do a clear text window dot clear. Yeah, I might do that right there. So let's see if it works now. What is your age? Let's do, we should still be able to get the input validation right. So if we put in 2, enter, okay, so we got to fix that a little bit. But enter yes to run again. So enter 16. Okay, enter no, and it ends. Got a couple structural issues here. Kind of what gets me when I go off on a tangent. So that is because come down here to validate, and this is really should be in a sub. Let's put this in a sub, and that might fix it. So sub validate age, really, because really this is where we're validating the age. And then end sub. Okay, so now all of this line 27 through 37 is inside of this sub validate really age. So we want to do this one, which gets the age, and then we want to validate the age really right there, and this is what checks the age. Okay. So no matter what, we're going to do those two. So let's run it again, see if that fixed our logic. So what's your age? 2. Sorry, but you entered an invalid age. Please try again. What's your age? Let's put in 150 just to check. Okay, what's your age? 19. You're old enough to watch the movie. Enter yes to run again with this information, or no to end. Yes. So even though it's not pretty, it should start over. What's your age? 14. You must be 16 or older to watch the movie. Do you want to run again? Yes. 87. You're old enough. Yes. 35. Yes. See, I'm not closing and opening the program all the time. I'm just responding to a question. And then when you get to a point when you want to end the program, type in NO or anything that's other than YES. Guess what? The program ends. Fancy. So we kind of fix things in that program. I will share this because I think this is a better way to structure it than what was originally there. Okay, so that's our first example. Now I know I'm out of my 20-minute time, so I can either keep going, which I have a lot of things to tell you still, or you can read the chapter on your own, which is something that you need to be doing. A lot of these examples we're going to cover in the code with me, so I guess I will stop for now on the lecture video. I don't feel that this is a very complete video because there's so much we need to cover. Here's another example. Actually, let me change this. Written by Professor Coates, and I'm going to modify it. Modified by, well, I'm a professor too, but I'll just say Katie, so you know which one you're looking at. I'll add that one into Blackboard. Okay, the second one that we have looked at, the Chapter 5 example, to get test scores. This is kind of a cool program. Again, I think these should be in modules other than, I think the main block should be in modules here. But there's another example you could look at as far as the things that you're going to read on your own. Chapter 5. I didn't pull up the book in front of me, so or online, but I could real quick. There's the topics. These are the things that you'll need to really read about because you'll be quizzed on them as well. A repetition, loops, they're just used. That's how things are done. So you always code with loops. Duplicate code makes a program large, so you write it once and call it multiple times. There's count controlled loops. The do until is not used very much. I'm sorry, condition controlled. These are the same as the user controlled I just showed you, where you say, do you want to run again? While loops, so while a condition is true, do some task. And the alternative is the do while. Do some task while the condition is true. So it's the difference between a pre-test condition or pre-test loop and a post-test. With any loop you code, be careful not to do an infinite loop. So that's where you would do something like, you'll code an infinite loop. Trust me. If you didn't have this line of code right here on 23 and you ran this program, you've never changed the age, so it just keeps going. You're never getting out of the loop, ever going anywhere, and you're stuck in this infinite loop forever and ever and ever and ever, and you can't end it. So make sure you avoid running an infinite loop by always changing your loop control variable. In this program example, it's run again. Here's the pseudocode and a flowchart of how to do while. Your condition control loops. So run on your program multiple times. It could be put within a loop, which we just showed you, and that will be a requirement for the programs. Here's the do while where the condition's at the bottom. Now in small basic, you can't do it. You have to do a while. And that's a bummer because do whiles are my favorite loops. Do until we won't even talk about because not a lot of languages do untils. For loops we'll do in the code with me, but these are count control loops. So when you know exactly how many iterations, you would use a count control loop. So we looked at one example already. For counter equals 1 as long as counter is less than 10. Continue. There's 3 parts. There's an initialization expression. That's that counter equals 1. There's a test, which is your condition, as long as counter is less than 10. And then the for loop automatically increments by 1 by default. So there's an increment expression. Now when we code it, when we code a for loop, there's not an example in there. Here's a for loop right here. Yeah, we'll look at a smaller example too, but number scores. When we code a for loop in small basic, it counts it through. It increments for us. In most for loops, it does that. So it says from count 1 to however many tests they had. So if they put up here we had 20 tests, this loop would go from 1 to 20. And then it'd do whatever you're doing inside of here. This is a good program. We're going to do something similar to that for our assignment. Or if you said, so here's the count part, and the initialization expression is here, count equals 1. This is kind of the whole test expression, count, as long as count is basically less than or equal to number of the scores, and then the incrementation does that automatically in the for loop, and it automatically counts or increments by 1. So read through this in the book that explains the for loop and the count controls. Don't forget to initialize the loop control. Don't forget to modify it or you'll get an infinite loop. And many loops are interchangeable. So while I can use, while it says to use a for loop for when you know exactly number of iterations, you could also use a while loop for that. You just have to manually change the count control, or the count control, or the count control variable. You just manually have to do it. Running total, this is incrementation. Read about it before we do the code with me. So go to that page of the book, 5.4, and read about accumulation, because this is how we add things to another thing. So when I want to add up test scores for all the students in my class, I'd have a variable like total scores, and then I would equal that to total scores plus student 1 score, plus student 2 score, student 3 score, and I accumulate. So accumulation is very big part of what happens in a lot of programs, and you'll want to know how you accumulate. So read that section in the book. And again, we'll be doing accumulation in our code with me, and you'll be doing it in the assignment. So that's calculating a running total, and it's always done the same way. Like read in a number and then total equals total plus that number that you're reading in. So that's on page 209 through 212. Read that before you go to the code with me. Sentinels are stop values. Read about that, and it's just a way to get out, like press 0 to exit the program. And then nested loops are loops inside of loops, and we will do this. Here's a for loop, and inside this for loop is a while loop. So here's the big for, and then we get the score, and then we test the score. So we're testing the score with a while loop. So that's just nested loops. It's important to comment, when you start a loop, it's important to end the loop so you don't get lost. So put your for up there and then your end for right away. And then when you start your while, end the while. But just like decisions where you have nested if-elses, you can have nested loops as well. So that concludes this. I will post this lecture video, and that's all of it. Read the chapter. Read, because that will help you to understand what's going on here. And then you'll be ready to do the code with me, where we'll code some examples from the book, and then you'll be ready to do the assignments on your own. So thanks for listening. Have a great day. 30 minutes, not bad. See ya.